In American society, money is a taboo topic. We're taught at a young age it's improper to talk about it, but we're also bombarded with messages about the power and importance of money in our everyday lives. And by not talking about it, we miss out on the skills and lessons we need to effectively understand and financially plan. That changes today. Welcome to Money Tales. Hosted by Sandy Brager and Cami Doder, Money Tales brings more than 35 years of combined professional experience in personal finance to demystify money and demonstrate what it's like to speak openly about personal financial matters. Join us each episode as they interview modern-day movers and shakers about how money decisions intertwine with their daily lives in order to give you better insight into productive financial conversations. Subscribe today and register for our blog Fathom at aspiriant.com/podcasts to increase your money mojo. And now, here's Cami and Sandy.
Most of us carry our family systems into adulthood without even realizing it. From how we parent, to how we think about success, to how we handle money. But what happens when those inherited patterns stop working? When life hands us something so unexpected, we're forced to question it. Margaret Katz Cann, our guest on Money Tales, calls it the family forcefield, that invisible pull to repeat what we grew up with, even when it no longer serves us. Margaret shares how her son's crisis shattered that force field and pushed her into deep self-examination, revealing just how hard and necessary it can be to break the script and forge your own path. Let me tell you more about Margaret. She's a pro when it comes to talking about money. After 22 years at the Community Foundation Boulder County, where she helped raise over $160 million for the community, Margaret left to start her own business. She founded MKC Coach to help people who need to raise money do the work they want to see happen in the world. She is also the author of I Used to Be Good, How I Found My Voice by Losing My Pleaser, due out later in 2025. Margaret tells us the raw and vulnerable book is about her personal journey to find her own voice, a path through a wealthy and chaotic childhood that looked great from the outside.
Here are 3 key money topics Margaret hits on in this conversation. First, the emotional fallout of being played by a money scam. Second, use your money for what lights you up. Spend on what matters, what you treasure, and what connects directly to your heart. And third, break free from financial manipulation. When money becomes a power play, don't surrender to despair. Unleash your creativity instead. Now it's our pleasure to bring you Margaret Katz Cann's Money Tales.
Welcome to the Money Tales podcast. I'm Cami Doder.
And I'm Sandy Brager.
Sandy, this past weekend, I volunteered on Sunday for a Girl Scout camp, and it got me thinking about time as a currency.
Ooh, say more.
I have to admit, I'm a little bit begrudging. I'm going to be volunteering, and this was voluntary prep, but it was an all-day event, learning about the camp. It's my one day that I really had to hang out with the family, and I felt like I was giving something up. Then we got there, and you're talking to people who give a lot more than I do. These women have contributed year after year and impacted so many people, and I was just humbled as I'm thinking about one day out of my life that I'm going to go volunteer. And then one of the gals who does volunteer a lot commented that by us volunteering our time, we are allowing 6 girls to get to camp. That value, and it really made me feel good.
She added a little dollar element to the time cost.
Impact, I think. She made me realize, I know it's a great cause and it's so wonderful, but I really did. I'm driving early in the morning. Darn it. I'm really missing out on some fun with the family. I got so much out of it. I'm so impressed with some of these other women, but it did make me think about your time is such an important currency. And I'm really excited to be giving back when I do be part of the camp.
Cami, that's so cool. So is the idea that by having more volunteers, the camp is not having to pay as many people so they can foster more scholarships?
The camp doesn't pay for any of the people working at the camp.
It's all volunteer based.
All volunteer.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Incredible. My girls have gone twice. This one gal, as I'm leaving for the day, said, "Oh, thank you so much." And I'm like, "Oh, thank you." She said, "This is a life-changing camp." And wow, what a neat thing.
You talk about money with your children a lot. Did you talk about the volunteer aspect of the camp with them?
I haven't yet. I will have to bring that up. That's important, Sandy. I appreciate you saying that. They too wanted me around yesterday. It was a give for them. And I like this idea of by them giving me up for the day, they're giving back as well. That's their currency to some degree and being able to support this camp.
We used to say at the Community Foundation that things we have to give are time, treasure, and talent.
The 3 T's. What a great opportunity now to welcome our Money Tales guest today, Margaret Katz Cann. It's a pleasure to be talking with you on Money Tales.
Hi, Margaret.
Hi, Sandy. Hi, Cammie. Thanks for having me.
Would you introduce yourself and share a couple pivotal moments that have taken place in your life that really influenced who you are?
Most of my professional life was spent as a frontline fundraiser for the Community Foundation in Boulder County, Colorado, which is where I live. And now I work as a fundraising coach, helping people learn how to raise money and slay their fundraising dragons. It's really hard for a lot of people to ask for money, and they trip a lot over it. I love the work. I love what I do. Here are 2 pivotal moments in my money life. It's not really my money life, just my life. They're both kind of hard moments, but I feel like sometimes those are the pivot moments. I don't know about anybody else. I've never pivoted in a unicorn day or a gumdrop day. So one is that I had a really difficult teenager, and he went completely off the rails when he was in 10th grade. It was just this giant sign that everything that I had thought was right wasn't working anymore. And it set our whole family into a giant systems change. So I would say that's a giant pivotal moment. Another pivotal moment, again, was getting divorced in the middle of COVID. It was just so much. It demanded me to change everything.
Oh, man, for sure.
The first time ever that I had lived by myself, and you have not done by yourself until nobody will spend time with you because it's the middle of lockdown. And it was a lot. Those were the 2 things that popped up for me.
Margaret, thanks so much for sharing that with us. And we want to talk about those pivotal moments. Before we do, when you were growing up, would you share when did money start to have meaning to you and what was happening as a result?
I have 2 very educated, well, my mother is still alive. My father passed away last fall. Very educated, very driven parents. When I was 7 years old, my father walked away from a law firm partnership in New York City to go pursue his fortunes in Boulder, Colorado. So we moved out here. I don't believe that he had a job or a line on a job. He was just ready to be entrepreneurial. It was a big move, both literally and figuratively. And he went after it hard, and he did really, really, really well. And so from that point on, money really was a big part of our family. He got very wealthy.
Were you talking about it?
I'm not sure that we had a lot of healthy money conversations, but it was always in the space about what money can buy and what experiences can happen with money. And my parents were also pretty philanthropic. There was a lot of generosity, both official and with friends and family. Did we have explicit conversations about it? Not a ton, but it was always part of the conversation in an implicit way.
Sounds like it was a character. Money was a character in the stories that you guys were talking about and telling each other.
It was a character. It was the background. It was the motivator. It was kind of everywhere in the fabric of what was going on.
What impact did that have on your life as you grew older and became an adult and started to have your own independent money life?
There was a lot of privilege, so I'm going to name that. My family had money to send me to college, and we went on amazing trips, and I had new clothes. There were a lot of great things. Sometimes with money, people don't behave perfectly, and I'm going to say some of that happened in my family as well. There's a way sometimes as young adults that we get enmeshed with families as part of businesses, and people move out and they have more autonomy in their lives. And if you're still involved with a family something, then there's less of a break. So I would say my arc of learning and taking over for money was maybe a little bit later than average.
You were not young when you felt you were gaining the financial confidence.
Certainly, I had friends where the day they graduated from high school, their parents were like, see you later. Good luck with all that. And that was not my situation. I would say more in my early 30s did things really become much more independent.
Was there a reason? Was there anything going on in your life that made you wake up to it?
There was a giant reversal of fortune for my family and a big loss of everything. And then there was no more connection on that topic. It all went away.
Can you tell us about your experience with that loss and how it hit you personally?
So my family was caught up in an investment scheme. Everything went away, and it had a lot of impact, both financially. It certainly had impact. My parents were invested with Madoff. And so it had both, a big financial impact as it did for many. And yeah, there was a giant emotional impact of shame and feeling like everybody should have known. And it was really an uncomfortable time, very dark to have lost something that you actually believed was an investment and then retroactively be told, no, it wasn't.
Can be very devastating, especially for the entire family. I'm curious, Margaret, as someone who is now focusing her life on helping people fundraise and learn how to ask for money, how is that situation, observing that through your parents having made this investment that turned out to have been a scam through no fault of their own? How's that impacted you on your professional life and what you're doing today and how you coach people in asking for money?
I was working as a fundraiser long before that happened. But in the fundraising coaching, what we're really looking for is people's money stories. That's where people really stumble when they're asking for money. The most obvious story might look like, geez, when I went to middle school and I asked for a new pair of jeans because my jeans didn't fit me anymore. This is not my story. This is a common story. My parents made me feel so badly about how expensive it was and that they couldn't afford it. And so now that translates into a money story as an adult who's trying to raise money. As when you think about asking for money, you're expecting to be shamed and told that you're not worth the new clothes. And it's very, very hard when you come from something that is scarce to believe that other people let money flow in the same way, Cammie, that you let your time flow over the weekend. They decide ahead before they ask somebody that the person's going to say no, because that was their experience with their parents. So that's kind of on one side of the spectrum. However, people who grow up with money, they don't get practice asking. You see that if you're on boards where if each board member needs to write a check, they'll just write a check. They won't do the dinner or ask friends or whatever. They have a different reason for thinking that they can't ask. And it's that they had so much growing up that they would never have asked for anything. They didn't need to ask other people for money. And so they come in with a very different money story. Money flows, money comes, money goes. I'm not sure that it played solidly into my career as I coach people.
Your career is really interesting going into fundraising. There's a lot of people that would say it just scares them. That's why you're coaching people. It scares them. Yet you chose it. Would you describe how that came about and how did you get comfortable yourself being in this role?
I started after my older son was born. I had worked as a journalist before that, which I actually really loved and enjoyed. And I have a master's degree in that. But the hours were so vicious. I just couldn't do it with a new baby. I just found that I couldn't do it. And so I decided that for a year, I would just stay home and take in writing projects, be like a contract ghostwriter. And somebody contacted me, the person who became my boss at the Community Foundation, to write a grant proposal. And it had been a really hard grant proposal for the organization because it was a gay and lesbian fund. And so you wouldn't think in Boulder, Colorado, that would be controversial. But in 1996, which is when that was, she gave me 3 days to do a pretty extensive grant proposal. And coming from the world of journalism, I was like, 3 days, that's a lifetime. Part of that grant proposal, which we got, was to raise a match. in order to get the grant. And I was like, sure, I can help with that. It was so much more interesting than writing newsletters and business plans for corporate clients. So I said yes. And I moved into the Community Foundation and I just started. We need to raise $25,000 to get this grant. What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? So I'm going to say I kind of fell into it.
And had comfort, it sounds like. Wasn't overwhelmed by having these money conversations.
I would describe myself as a joyful fundraiser because I believe that when people make a donation of time, but mostly of money, to something where they have a direct connection to the impact that it's having, it's something that they value, that they care about, that's the best money that they spend. And when you believe that, it makes it much easier to ask people.
And that's the key to fundraising. It's finding other people who feel the same way about the organization or the cause, whatever you're raising the money for.
The mission of, for sure, of the organization and the kind of work.
And finding that alignment. But still, it's scary for some people to make that ask.
It is. It's really scary for people to make that ask.
How do you coach clients of yours who have that fear, that trepidation? What are some tools that our listeners might be able to utilize in their day-to-day lives as they're thinking about money for themselves?
One of the first things that we do is try to name what your story is about money, what you learned, whether it's from your parents or sometimes for people, it's from their places of faith or their communities. They have a lot of narratives about money that they're holding on to really tightly. And so the first place where we can dig around is what's maybe a story that you believe that maybe it isn't empirically true. Maybe it was just what your family wanted you to believe because that's how your family worked. Because if you try to go ask for money and you've got your mom on your shoulder saying, money doesn't grow on trees, it's really hard.
That'll hit you in the gut. I'm not supposed to be doing this. Mom said not to.
And I would say that the second area of giant impact for people is, and I'm going to relate this to public speaking because sometimes fundraising is public speaking, but sometimes it's just one-on-one. But when people have anxiety about public speaking, they often reach for an archetype of the kind of person, the CEO. Somebody's going to listen to the CEO or maybe like the brilliant Silicon Valley founder guy, whatever your archetype is of who gets listened to. And then we contort to put on a metaphorical three-piece suit and act like a CEO because we think that that's the archetype that's good at asking or public speaking.
Oh, that's interesting rather than being your authentic self.
Correct. When we think about people public speaking, which has so much anxiety also, that makes sense. Oh, sometimes you hear a speaker and they're trying so hard to have you know that they're smart. And if they would just crack a joke, everything would be better. And so it's that territory. When people get anxious, they put on a mask or a three-piece suit and they try to act like a person they think will be taken seriously. And they totally lose track of maybe that person is actually really funny or they resonate because they're odd or quirky or eccentric. And how can you break up that archetype and stop trying to be that and just act like yourself, which is a lot to ask under stress, but that's a place of a lot of rich personal development for people.
Well, I'm glad you're bringing that up because I think even in the most casual of money conversations, many of us feel that way. A topic comes up that we don't know something about and we feel like we should know it. And so we'll just pretend maybe.
Or we'll just sort of gloss over it.
I can pull this off. I can sound like I'm smart and informed, whereby it would probably be okay just to say like, oh, wow, I haven't heard of this before. Can you explain it to me? Would work just as well.
And there's a total echo of that in the fundraising world where people come and they just want to saturate the other person with information. Where sometimes if you don't know something and you say, I'm not sure, that's such a great question. Let me go look that up and I'll get back to you. You sound like less of a blowhard. But also you've now bought yourself a chance to call this person back. There's an automatic follow-up, that like thing with a date. Leave your sweater in the car. So that if you like him, you can call and get your sweater back.
Margaret, you said you help people name what their story is around money. And I am reminded of that saying, you name it to tame it. And I'm curious, do you actually have some predetermined names that you bring in, or do you let the person come up with whatever their story name is?
Mostly there's space for people to name their own money story. However, in the world of fundraising and nonprofits in general, there's a lot of people pleasing. It's not even like the fundraisers and the nonprofit people got way more pleaser for the most part, or that's drawn to this work. That's one that comes up more than you would expect in a cross section of the population.
Margaret, I want to switch gears back to your pivotal moments. And you very vulnerably shared the experience with your teenager who created some behaviors that you weren't anticipating. And I want to be sensitive and not go too deep, but I'm curious if and how that situation may have interrupted your money life and your own money story, and whether there's something about it that we can all learn from.
I actually have a manuscript that I've written that I'm hoping will get published this year, but it is very much about my experience, and there's a lot through the lens of coaching. But I call this thing that my friend made up, and he made it up not as a compliment, but Margaret, you're in the Katz family Forcefield right now. And I talk about that Forcefield when you go back home for Thanksgiving dinner and you're suddenly fighting with your sibling, even though you're however old you are.
And you're just regressing back to that childhood or adolescent behavior.
Correct. And if you grew up in a really high achieving family, you maybe never questioned. You just get a high achieving job and now you're a hard worker, and you just have never really questioned that narrative so much. And I'm going to say that within that Forcefield, there was a lot about how we think about money and what we do with money and all those spaces. And I would say when my son went off the rails, it was my first moment to just put everything on the table, every way that I had been parenting, because this is what my patterns were. This is what my family did. Every way that we maybe spoiled him in ways that didn't serve him, every way that he was struggling and we responded or didn't respond. Everything became fair game to examine. So I would say, it's a pivotal moment in part because it was the first time I stepped so consciously out of that Forcefield to be like, okay, that's not working here. What else is there out there?
And what did that feel like for you?
At the time, thing number one that happened was that I cried for a month and a half, just the despair. He went to wilderness program and he went to boarding school and he was 15. And the idea that 3 of the precious years of having him live at home, I thought that were ahead, that I was about to lose 1 or 2 of those, and the ways that everything hadn't worked and the place of suffering that you see, I just let go. And it was the first time probably in my life that I just sobbed. I just absolutely let myself be in a place of despair. That was a big deal. That was the first fracture because that was not something that I ever would have done as a child. My father, who very deeply wanted me to be successful, and in his law firm, all the women were secretaries back when he worked there. And so he wouldn't let me take typing. The other thing he did was that if I started crying in a conversation, he would leave the room because he was like, if you do this at work, nobody is ever going to take you seriously.
So that was really getting outside of the Forcefield.
I knew it came from a place of good intent, but let me tell you, like trauma, it kind of had me swallow a lot of emotions as I was growing up. And that was my first cathartic. I can cry. I can do that.
You're very emotional, and there are money aspects to getting your son what he needed at the time. Sometimes emotions and money can be a really hard cocktail for people to swallow. How were you thinking about the money aspects as you were going through this hard period?
If anybody has looked at therapeutic boarding school, it's wildly expensive. And I had hoped that my parents might help, but they did not support my now ex-husband in my decision to do this. And so they didn't help. And so we started selling things. That was how we paid for it. There's a way that sometimes having people who you thought would support you pull out crystallizes a sense of resourcefulness. I've already decided that this is the program that he needs, and I'm going to figure it out. I mean, and my ex-husband and I both worked and both made reasonable salaries. It wasn't a bankrupting event for us, but it was a rude introduction also to the ways that sometimes families, money and love get withdrawn in a package deal.
Was that hard when your parents refused to support your decisions financially?
Of course. The financial part, again, we were resourceful and we were good savers, and it wasn't going to keep us from doing this. But the way that it was used to sort of be manipulative, to say, like, I don't approve and this is where I have control, is by not supporting you either emotionally or financially, because they were together. But I think the pulling away of the emotional support was 100% more painful. But in a lot of families with money, there's a lot of financial trauma and ways that money is used.
It's a big part of that money story that you were talking about before that we don't always understand and appreciate.
There's a big money story out there that people with a lot of money are jerks and are entitled to jerks, and we don't like them. And it's not a great space to raise money from.
Lots of judgments.
It's not wrong and it's not right. There is no generalization that we can make there.
No, but wouldn't the world be beautiful if we didn't have to judge one another before really understanding each other's stories to be able to empathize?
Observation, right? You can observe without judgment. That's the ultimate. Margaret, you mentioned that money just flows. I appreciate that. You've given this incredible story. It seems like you're in a new space. Would you describe what that means to you?
That concept was sort of named for me by Lynn Twist, who's the author of The Soul, which I am sure has come up before.
We've talked with Lynn before. Yeah, that was really fun.
Money should be flowing like a river.
Okay, so you were impacted by that. What does that mean to you, and how does it play out in your life?
It plays out in coaching, and it played out when I worked at the Community Foundation, that when we as people or as an organization, when we truly decide that we're going to make something happen, we find the resources for it. And I'm not using myself as an example because I know that I have resources available to me, especially growing up, that other people don't have. But I just have seen this over and over again with my clients, with the organization that I worked for. You know, if we decided we needed $4 million to do X, Y, or Z, and once we were really sure that that's what we needed, and we vibrated with certainty that that's what we needed, people gave us the money that we needed. And so I just have seen it over and over and over again, that it's not about deciding that you need the money first. It's about deciding what you need to happen. Over and over and over again, people who don't have this in their bank account find a way, or something happens that makes it possible.
Dreams and goals. You just keep the focus there. It all works out.
And desire. When we truly desire something and we get so clear about it, things sometimes just start happening.
Will you tell us, what is your next money conversation going to be, and who's it going to be with?
Well, it's late afternoon here, so I think my next client is tomorrow. That is what I do with my clients. So it will be a money conversation.
So glad you have these conversations and you get deep and emotional with them and you talk to them about their stories. And it's been a great way to bring it to life here. Margaret, share, where's the best place for our listeners to find you?
My website is MKC Coach, my initials, and the word coach.com. There's a place to contact me through the website if anybody is interested. And I also am happy for any fundraisers or executive directors out there who are struggling to hop on a call and see if I can help.
Oh, what a nice offer. And congratulations on the manuscript. Good luck with that. And thank you for joining us on Money Tales.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Money Tales podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, share it with someone you think would benefit from listening. And leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Your ratings and reviews help more people find our podcast. If you're inspired to gain clarity and peace of mind about financial matters, don't hesitate to reach out to our team at Aspirient. Go to aspirient.com/start a dialogue. Or you can email Sandy and me at podcasts@aspirient.com. See you next time.